In this video chapter, I will discuss the overall process involved in a successful Porsche 911 engine rebuild project. Some of you may already have the experience rebuilding other engines, so this may not be as useful. However, if this is your first time rebuilding any type of engine, yet alone a Porsche 911 engine, I think you will appreciate this particular video chapter as it is the roadmap that touches upon the major key steps before assembly can begin. As you watch the video, keep in mind that I will discuss each one of the major topics seen here in greater detail on subsequent video chapters. So for now, let's just see what you can expect once you have successfully disassembled the engine and you are ready to start the engine rebuild process. One of the very first things to determine is the overall budget. This will determine whether the engine configuration will remain strictly stock or if it can include some performance upgrades beyond what is recommended. There are many engine configurations that have been tried and proven to be very successful and reliable by many Porsche owners. I have a lot of helpful information on my website on this particular topic to help find the best option that suits you best. Keep in mind that making a decision on the engine configuration at this point in time is key since it will dictate what parts to buy and what machine shop services to perform. I will mention one bit of advice. If your budget cannot support all the modifications you will like done, then an option is to do it in stages. Therefore, you don't need to build a tricked out street or racing engine all at once, but rather upgrade some key components now that will in turn support future modifications towards your ideal engine configuration. A simple example of this would be to install JE pistons, which have a larger valve pocket to accommodate high lift cams. The high lift cams can be installed years after you have rebuilt the engine, and with the skills you will obtain from these instructional videos means that this once complicated modification will now become but a simple weekend project. Once you have determined the engine configuration and the budget, the next step is to find a good, reputable machine shop that is highly experienced in Porsche engines. Discuss with the machine shop mechanic the engine configuration you want so that components can be machined accordingly. I will cover this topic in greater detail on subsequent video chapters. The important thing is to establish good communication rapport with the machinist performing the work. On my website, you will find a list of highly recommended machine shops in addition to the various machining processes for each of the engine components. Familiarize yourself with each of these machining processes so that you may communicate efficiently with your machinist. Now that you have discussed all the work to be done, it is time to pack and ship the parts to the machine shop. This goes without saying, but make sure all the components are packed properly and with plenty of packing material to prevent damage during shipping. One crucial tip is to never use styrofoam, especially on the engine case and crank. You don't want any styrofoam particles finding their way into any of the oil orifices on both of these key components. I personally use newspaper and cardboard, plus I wrap the engine case and the crank in heavy-duty plastic bags. Here are some of the main components you want inspected and serviced. I will also recommend that you uniquely inscribe or engrave all the parts before you ship them. I personally like to use the Dremel since it allows me to clearly handwrite a number which identifies its original order and location in the engine. This will also be very useful for your machinist when the parts are inspected, as it can't pinpoint a problem to a specific location. Of course, this simple step will give you a peace of mind that comes from knowing your parts can be easily recognized and distinguished from any others. Therefore, you could avoid any unnecessary delays and further ensure their safe return. As a final note on this topic, do not clean any of the components before you ship them to the machine shop. The reason is because oil and carbon deposits on individual components can provide some insight as to the overall condition of the engine before it was disassembled. This can provide critical information to the eyes of an expert that can be used to address and repair an otherwise hard to detect problem. Now that all the parts have been shipped, I have a few recommendations that will ensure an efficient use of your time while you wait for the parts to return. Let's begin with the timeline involved to provide some perspective. If you have a local machine shop, this will not be a factor. But if you do not, then plan for UPS or FedEx ground shipping to take a week each way. The machine shop will typically take 2 to 3 weeks to perform all the machining services. You may want to discuss this upfront with the shop, for it could be less or more depending on their workload. In total, you have approximately 5 weeks before you receive the parts back. Furthermore, if time is a factor for you, I would also recommend for you to request from the machine shop for the engine case to be done first and shipped back to you as soon as it is complete. This will allow you to prepare the engine case ahead of the remaining parts due to arrive a couple of weeks later. You will see more about this in a minute. Now, here are my recommendations as you wait for the engine parts to arrive. Prepare a suitable workspace for the engine assembly. During the engine disassembly, this may not be as important, but during the engine assembly, a suitable workspace is crucial. I have a separate video chapter solely dedicated to this topic. Also, at this time, you may want to begin inspection and cleaning of all the remaining engine parts, such as the oil cooler, distributor, ignition wires, etc. Now, I would estimate that by the end of the second week or beginning of the third week, your engine case should be back. At this point, you can begin preparing your engine case halves for assembly. On the second week, I would also recommend you speak to the machinist to inquire about the condition of all the engine components to determine if any need replacing or if additional machining services will be necessary. In addition, determine the overall condition of all the engine components in your possession. Once this has been done, you can proceed to the next step, and that is to order new parts. The list of new parts to order will be based on the inspection and condition of all the parts in your possession, plus any parts that your machinist recommends to replace based on their evaluation. Finally, there's always the required gasket kits for a good quality top-end or bottom-end rebuild. Shown here are some of the parts you will need to order. A complete list is available on my website. It is essential to note that the crank and connecting rod bearings are available in different sizes. Therefore, your machine shop must tell you if you can use the standard size or if you need to use the oversized bearings. I developed an easy-to-follow point-and-click parts selection tool only available on my website to help you determine all the parts necessary to rebuild your specific motor. Now I will discuss a topic that many of you could find useful. I noticed a trend years ago that now seems to be standard practice when an engine is rebuilt. This is to powder coat engine components. I decided it was easier to clean my engine components by sandblasting rather than spending hours with a wire brush. Consequently, powder coat as a final step in this cleaning process was the only logical step to obtain a great and long-lasting finish on all my engine components. Shown here, shortly after the engine was disassembled, are the best candidates to be sandblasted. Note that the engine shroud is fiberglass, therefore it requires a special primer that will enable the electrostatic charged dry paint to adhere properly to its surface. While we're on the subject, I will also mention one more component you can powder coat. It will take a little bit more work in your part, but it is worth the effort. This is to powder coat the engine case. Here's how the engine case will look once sandblasted, polished, and finally with a clear powder coat finish applied. You may find more details on my website about this specific process, and I will provide answers to the most frequently asked questions regarding powder coating the engine case. Once you decide which parts to powder coat, proceed to pack and ship them accordingly if the shop is not local. You may choose to skip the sandblast and powder coat process. If so, you can proceed directly to the next step. At this point, you're now waiting for all the parts to return. This includes all the new parts you ordered, the parts from the machine shop, and of course, any that were sent to be powder coated. Now you will begin the next phase of the project, and one which I dedicate a lot of time to explain in great detail with step-by-step instructions on over 20 individual video chapters. This, of course, is the engine assembly process. Even if you have never built an engine before, you will soon find that in a short time of watching my instructional videos that you will acquire the knowledge and the confidence to rebuild your own Porsche 911 engine. The videos will cover every nut and bolt installed on the engine and also explain complicated procedures such as how to adjust the mechanical timing, all done in a manner that is simple to follow and comprehend. If you're watching this video, then I must assume you know how exhilarating and unique the experience is to sit behind the wheel of a Porsche 911 as you shift through the gears on a winding stretch of road. As for myself, well, even now, after owning the same 911 for over 20 years, I can honestly tell you that I still get a thrill every time I drive it. I will share a photo of my 911 engine, which I used in the making of all the assembly instructional videos. It is a 1982 911 SC, and the motor is a 3.2-liter short-stroke, twin-plugged with 46mm PMO carburetors. Visit my website for information on all the instructional videos, plus all of the features specifically designed to help you rebuild your 911 motor.